Bright sun was shining through my window today when I rise. Time's come to wipe away the slumber from these tired eyes. I said, it's time for rest when the work is done. When night is falling, yes, there's time for fun. But when the sun hits your eyes in the morning, take a good meditation.
You will not just live as I sing.
When the sun hits your eyes, just take a meditation.
Hello and welcome to the Humanity videocast for January 24th, 2019. I'm Tom Quine, and today I would like to talk about some important big questions in philosophy. What is the purpose of life, and what is the meaning of life? So let's start off with the first one. These are questions, of course, which have bedeviled the philosophers for, well, really since the dawn of philosophy. But today, in the light of modern science and in the light of evolutionary theory, they don't look so complicated at all. So what is the purpose of life? Well, rather than try to invent or think of what should be the purpose of life, let's look at what actually science tells us is the purpose of life. Every living thing gets up in the morning filled with purpose, and that purpose is to survive, to find something to eat, to stay away from danger, to maybe find a mate and reproduce, and in general to flourish as an individual, and in so doing to flourish as a species. So the purpose of life, according to science, and I'm talking about life, capital L life, is to flourish. So let's take a look at what the meaning of the word to flourish is and discuss that for a little bit. So if you disagree that the purpose of life is to flourish, then I would really like to hear from you, because I can't think of any purpose that any person has that does not ultimately lead back to helping themselves or helping the larger humanity to flourish, helping their families to flourish, helping their communities to flourish, helping human beings to flourish. I think that's the purpose, and if you disagree, okay, let's hear from you. But if you do agree that the purpose of life is to flourish, bear with me, then there are a lot of implications for many areas of philosophy. For example, in moral philosophy, when we ask what's right and what's wrong, what is moral and what is ethical and what is not, we have to look at that through the lens of our larger purpose. And our larger purpose, of course, being to flourish, we can say that that which is right, that which is moral and ethical, is that which helps us to flourish, especially that which helps humanity to flourish. And that which is wrong, immoral, sinful, and bad is that which hinders human flourishing. Similarly, with respect to justice, we can say that which is just is that which enables human flourishing. That which is unjust is that which hinders it. And if you take a look at any justice movement, you can trace it back to people believing that what they consider to be unjust is that which hinders human flourishing. And what they consider to be justice is that which they believe will help human flourishing. Now, I'm going to return to these topics in greater depth in future videocasts, but right now I just want to plant a flag on this issue because I think that's a keystone of my thinking about all of philosophy. So when I talk about flourishing, I am drawing heavily on the work of Aristotle, who wrote that the purpose of life was eudaimonia, which means flourishing. Now, the word eudaimonia is a Greek word which was originally translated as happiness. However, later scholarship, looking at what Aristotle was actually trying to say and what he meant, decided that a better translation would be flourishing. So it's not a new concept. Aristotle was writing, after all, 2,500 years ago. If you take a look online, you will find that there are literally hundreds of books that draw on Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia and use the word flourishing. And so I'm not saying anything that is particularly earth-shaking or new here. I believe I'm stating the obvious. However, it's by no means the majority opinion, because an awful lot of people out there have some other purpose in mind when they talk about the purpose of life. And in particular, religious people will believe that the purpose of life is given to you by God. And to say that it comes down to flourishing is to say that the purpose of life is given to you by nature. Okay, so let's look a little deeper into the question of into the word flourishing and what does it mean. We can take, for example, a very common phrase that you hear fairly often: "My garden is flourishing." Well, what does that mean? That means the plants are growing well, and they're growing well because they have good soil, they have adequate water, there's plenty of sunshine. You've been doing the weeding, so they're not facing too much competition. They are growing tall and bearing fruit. The garden is flourishing. Now, if we take an animal species, for example, the Canada lynx. I'm a Canadian, so I know about the Canada lynx. The Canada lynx will flourish if there are lots of snowshoe hare around for them to catch and eat. And if there are, then they will be, able to reproduce nicely. They have lots of litters and kittens. The population grows. They're healthy because they're getting enough food and enough exercise from chasing rabbits. And so we can say the Canada lynx will flourish in this area if they have adequate access to their natural prey, which is the snowshoe hare. And what does it mean for human beings to flourish? Well, we could say that, my sister has got a new job at XYZ Corporation, and she's flourishing there. And what we would mean by that is that, she's experiencing some personal growth from her new challenges at her new position. She's getting an adequate salary, so she's able to be independent and take care of herself. She likes her co-workers and she enjoys the work, and the place where she's living is very suitable for her. And so my sister at XYZ Corporation is flourishing. And we can say the same thing for various communities. We can say that this or that community is flourishing because there's adequate security, there's adequate regulations and laws, there is a minimum of violence, there's adequate access to nutrition, health care, and so on. And that's what it means to flourish. Now, the reason I like the approach of flourishing as opposed to what some people will say. Some people will say, the purpose of life is happiness. Or they'll say the purpose of life is well-being. Now, the problem with those two is that well-being and happiness are passive brain states. These are, states that you get into, and typically they're temporary. Happiness comes and goes. You're happy at 2 o'clock, you're unhappy at 4 o'clock. You have a deep sense of well-being for a month, and then you lose your job, and then you lose your sense of well-being. And so to achieve this temporary state of well-being or happiness is kind of inadequate in my view. The reason I like flourishing better is because it's an active verb. In order to flourish, you have to get out there with your hands and feet and do some work and do something. And of course, every living creature will engage in some form of work in order to get the means of subsistence, and in order to find a mate, in order to reproduce, and in order to pass its genes on to the next generation, and in order to flourish as an individual and as a species, we have to do some work. And so flourishing captures that in a way that happiness and well-being do not. So let's move on now to talk about the meaning of life. And I'm always reminded of a quote that I heard from the great professor of mythology, Joseph Campbell. And now Joseph Campbell was a university professor for many decades. He taught mythology, and he taught his students to look for the meaning behind the myths. And as a result, he said he would regularly have students come up to him and say, "Yes, but what is the meaning of life itself?" And his answer was always the same. He would say, "Look, that's not the right question to ask. The question that you should be asking is, what meaning will you give to your life?" And so I think we need to keep that in mind when we look at what is the meaning of life. What is the meaning that you will give to your life? Now, given that your biological imperative, your prime imperative, is to flourish, both as an individual and to help your species to flourish, then you need to ask yourself, what meaning can I give to my life? How can I help? It's going to come down to helping yourself and helping the species to flourish. So how can I do that? Well, you can do that on many different levels. You can say, if you just restrict yourself to, you have to start with yourself. So you need to challenge yourself. You need to grow. You need to evolve. Yeah, you need to take care of yourself and make sure that you do well. Otherwise, you won't be able to help anybody else. But if you restrict your circle of moral concern just to yourself, and you say, well, it's all about me and everybody else can go die, I think that's a rather selfish and counterproductive way to view things, and it's not going to help the human race to flourish. Now, I know there's an awful lot of people who have that opinion. You've got psychopaths, you've got sociopaths, you've got narcissists, you've got libertarians, you have certain members of the Republican Party who will say, yeah, it's all about me, and that's probably the right way to do things. It's every dog for himself, and you need to take care of your thing, and I'll take care of mine, and never the twain shall meet. You're on your own. But you could, for example, extend your circle of moral concern just a little bit wider to your family. And a lot of people go as far as the family, and they stop there, and they say, look, my family is my main concern. I'm going to make sure that I care for my family, make sure that their needs are met, make sure that I raise my children right, and to heck with everybody else. And that can be perfectly worthy. We need to reproduce the species, but you can also get pretty selfish about that, and people will commit all kinds of acts of crime in order to help their family. Of course, you have the classic crime family, but you also have a lot of corruption and people in high places saying, well, I did it for my family. Yeah, but if you have a larger circle of moral concern, you might extend it to your people. Well, who are your people? Well, for the religious, it's the people who share their religious tendencies. And this can be very positive, but can be also very destructive. So, for example, Muslims are in general a peace-loving and charitable people, especially towards other Muslims. But there are a percentage of Muslims who believe, for example, that all Jews and Christians should be driven from the land. And you see the same thing in Israel, where you will have a percentage of Jews who believe that they are the chosen people, and Israel is their right by God, and all Arabs should be driven from the land. You have, of course, Christian communities in the American South, in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, who have the same attitude. They say, all Muslims and Jews must go. You have Hindus saying the same thing in India, and you have Buddhists saying the same thing in Burma. And this is tribalism. And tribalism also extends to your race. A lot of people will say, my race is superior to your race, and your race is the devil. My nation is superior to your race, and your nation is just nothing but a shithole country, according to President Trump. So that's just tribalism, and tribalism goes all the way back to chimpanzee society, and probably a lot deeper than that. And it can help you to sacrifice yourself for your country and for your people and for your community. Very good. but it can also lead to very destructive wars and internecine conflict. Or you can extend your sphere of moral concern to the whole of humanity. And you can say the human race is my race. These are my people. And I will do what I have to do to advance the human project and to make the world a better place. So how can you do that? Well, this is the way that you can add meaning to your life. You can add meaning to your life, of course, on an individual basis where you challenge yourself and grow and evolve. You can take care of your family very good, raise your children right and make them healthy and strong. You can take care of your community in various ways, or you can say, well, look, I'm going to get involved in a variety of things. I'm going to help the needy. I'm going to volunteer to fight social injustice. I'm going to get politically active, and I'm going to change the world for the better. You can even make a contribution in your own little small way. You can write an original poem. Every human being is original, and everyone has an original contribution to make. You can sing a song or make some music. You can write yourself a book. You can go on YouTube and create a video cast and say your piece. Get out there and do it. That's the meaning that you will give to life. And again, I'm not trying to present anything strange and unusual. You're doing this every day, and that's the right thing to do. So that's how you add meaning to your own life. Now I'm going to be adding some comments about a lot of these topics in future video casts. I'm going to be talking about, for example, truth, morality, justice, God, and all of the big questions at some point. So if you like what I had to say, please share the link. Please subscribe to the channel. If you didn't like what I had to say, and I really, really want to hear from you, because I need to check in to make sure I'm on the right track. So speak your mind, and I'll give your comments to consideration. And that's it for, I guess, for today. I tried to keep it short, so I'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Bright sun was shining through my window today when I rise. Time's come to wipe away the slumber from these tired eyes. I said, stop for rest when the work is done. When night is falling, yes, there's time for fun. But when the sun hits your